and welcome to another installment of Liberty Nation's Swamponomics videocast. I'm Andrew Moran, Ellen's economics correspondent. Each week, I dive into the morass of top economic news stories and fish out compelling narratives, or I retrieve fallacies that have been accepted as conventional wisdom by the swamp creatures for years. This week, Federal Reserve, let the tapering begin. The year is 2023. The consumer price index is still high. Producer prices are running hot. The personal consumption expenditures price index is the highest it has been in decades, and consumer inflation expectations are still increasing. And yet Fed Chair Jerome Powell, or his successor, believes inflation is still transitory. Powell delivered prepared remarks during the Jackson Hole Virtual Summit, revealing that the Eccles building could start tapering the ultra-aggressive quantitative easing program by the end of the year. But interest rates could remain near zero until the economy fully recovers and full employment is achieved. In his speech, the central bank chief, who is nearing the end of his term, stated, quote, "The spike in inflation is so far largely the product of a relatively narrow group of goods and services that have been directly affected by the pandemic and the reopening of the economy." But this is complete nonsense. A look at the data suggests that everything has skyrocketed in the post-COVID economy, from food to automobiles to shelter to education. Nevertheless, since the Fed adjusted one of its chief mechanisms in handling inflation by allowing it to run hotter for longer and accomplish a sort of averaging, the central bank is ostensibly not too worried about price inflation, while Powell is still insisting that it is transitory. It has bought itself time to both stimulate the economy and rein in inflation. That said, how Powell defines transitory is unclear. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen recently revealed that high inflation levels will linger next year, but central banks worldwide are still using the vague verbiage of transitory. At least this is an improvement from rejecting even the possibility of inflation when these stimulus and relief measures were enacted at the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Still, not everyone is pleased by Powell's dismissive attitude toward the rampant inflation occurring in the United States today. Patrick Harker, the president of the Philadelphia Fed, told CNBC that, quote, "There is also some evidence that they may not be so transitory, and that's a risk I'm worried about." Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic also told the Business News Network, quote, "We want to make sure we're right on this because high inflation or anything close to runaway inflation is really going to hurt people at the bottom of the ladder." Indeed, as Liberty Nation recently reported, US workers are earning higher wages and benefits, but inflation is canceling out the gains. The Employment Cost Index, a gauge of overall employee compensation, tumbled in the second quarter and is now 2% below the pre-crisis level. The US annual inflation rate, meanwhile, is north of 5%. Even using the central bank's favorite measurement, the PCE price index shows the economy's economic recovery is in danger. This critical inflation gauge spiked 3.6% from a year ago to the biggest jump since the early 1990s. Ultimately, the Fed may be tapering monetary policy, but when this monetary printing endeavor has reached record levels and allowed the stock market to endure the largest asset bubble on record, is it really a taper after all? Perhaps once the Fed sees how Wall Street will fall flat in its face without the training wheels, Powell and company will taper the taper. That's it for me this week. Please read my full Swamponomics column where I discuss donut price inflation, global supply shortages, and Cuba goes crypto. Thank you.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.